hid under and behind tables until the shooting stopped and they could run away.
He had absolutely no indication that that individual was going to engage in a criminal act.
I don't think people use guns against each other just because they are guns.
No mercy for the scum of the earth. Humanity is overrated.
Aren't the saddest true crime cases those that could have been stopped? Sometimes killers exhibit a million worrying signs before doing the unspeakable, and it seems like they're this close to being stopped. Perhaps a friend, a schoolmate, or a family member will finally decide to do an intervention, but they never do, and the killer fully assumes his evil role. Well, in the sad case of Pekka-Eric Auvinen, there were plenty of warning signs.
We're always talking about warning signs, and could we have seen it coming? Well, you know what? If you want to look for warning signs, there they are. Those are your warning signs. Investigate those people.
When Pekka-Eric became a social outcast and started making online statements about being a natural selector, some people raised their eyebrows. But months passed, and as it often happens, people simply didn't take his threats seriously. After all, what could a high school boy do? Sadly, it was precisely his high school that suffered. Inspired by horrible events like the Columbine school shooting, Pekka-Eric opened his gun on his terrified schoolmates. But what was it that led him to do so? And could his descent into madness have been prevented? Let's dive in and investigate the case of the YouTuber turned murderer. Today's case takes us all the way to snowy Finland. Now, you might know the country for its fabulous auras or its magical reindeer sleigh rides. But Finland's cities are also something to behold. Finland has the world's best education system and is rated one of the happiest and cleanest countries in the world. Not far from Finland's capital city, Helsinki, is a smaller town, Tuusula. It's home to around 40,000 people, but there are more people who come to work here every day. Tuusula was the home of Pekka-Eric Auvinen. He was born on June 4th, 1989, to parents Ismo and Michaela. They were both in a pretty famous local band, with Michaela singing and playing acoustic guitar and Ismo on electric guitar. All in all, it was a pretty cool home to grow up in, and Eric was not alone as a child. He had a younger brother, and the two got along really well. But as they grew up, there wasn't much to do. Eric and his family lived in Jokela, northern Tuusula. Jokela is practically a village, perfect to start a family and never worry about crime or poverty. But villages are rarely perfect places for teenagers to live in. So Eric focused on his schoolwork, and for a while it paid off. His teachers would report good grades and perfect attendance scores. He was supposed to graduate in the summer of 2008 and go on to get a university degree, perhaps in Helsinki. But that was never going to happen, and the first warning signs were in Eric's behavior around his peers. Eric was a bright student, but a very shy classmate. Now, there's nothing wrong with being shy. Lots of us are introverts, and in this day and age, where we're so easily overstimulated by social media, it's not hard to imagine why. But Eric was beyond shy. He would willingly isolate himself and decline invitations to any social activity, and more often than not, he would visibly blush, feeling embarrassed by pretty much any social interaction. But there might be a sad reason behind it. Now, pretty much all bullying is long-term. This is what bullying means. Someone harasses you constantly over a prolonged period of time. So if Eric was the subject of frequent long-term bullying, it was probably a really bad case. Whether his shyness was a result of the bullying or he was bullied for being shy in the first place, we'll never know. They probably went hand in hand in a really sad scenario. Unfortunately, as it often goes in these cases, Eric would soon adopt a persona that would be immune to bullying. Someone so dark, so twisted, and so radical, he didn't care about those who wanted to hurt him. Now, he wanted to hurt others, and his first targets were those in his immediate sight, his schoolmates at Jokela High School. The teenagers who knew Eric as the shy, blushing boy were now afraid of him. They would report him to their teachers several times in 2006 and 2007. Apparently, he would threaten them with violence and swear that they would all die in a white revolution. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. At one point, one of Eric's teachers wrote a report saying Eric had expressed far left and far right views to a worrying degree. This wasn't a political interest, not even a fascination. It was an obsession, and it would consume Eric. As it turns out, Eric was a Nazi enthusiast, and he would spend a lot of time online searching about the regime and its warped ideologies. Yet another red flag that was signaled, but not really addressed. But there was something that Eric's family would address. Eric might have chosen this horrible personality to counter the bullying victim and shy student personality, but there were still traces from his past. Eric suffered from severe depression and anxiety, and Ismo and Michaela noticed that. In the fall of 2006, Michaela referred her son to a local psychologist. Eric didn't oppose it. He wanted to feel better. But the consultation didn't go that well. The psychologist asked him a few questions and concluded that his symptoms are mild, so he didn't suggest that they meet again. He simply prescribed him antidepressants and sent him home. Now, there are just about 1,000 reasons not to push pills before trying therapy, even in adults, let alone children and teenagers whose brains are still developing. Yeah, maybe Eric's doctor was a bit brash. Meanwhile, Eric would spend all his spare time in his room, slouched up around his computer. One of his biggest passions was playing violent video games, like Battlefield 2. His alias was Natural Selector 89. His other passion was making music. Of course, it ran in the family. Except Eric's music would be a little more aggressive than that of his parents. One of his songs was literally titled Antisocial Aggression. Sadly, the more Eric shunned a social life, the more interested he grew in violent content. Disturbed by his behavior, his classmates stopped inviting him to events or regular hangouts altogether. So Eric delved even deeper into the dark corners of the internet. On top of this, he wouldn't take his treatment for days or weeks at a time. He was spiraling at an unprecedented pace, and no one around him knew what to do. By early 2007, Eric had a strong fascination with the Columbine school shooting. When it happened, Columbine was the bloodiest school massacre in the US. It sent shivers down the spines of millions and opened up discussions about gun laws and firearm possession in teenagers. But for Eric, Columbine was something to admire, not fear. He would post videos about it and about the 2003 Iraq invasion, the Syrian attack on the Tokyo subway, and the bloody Waco siege. If you don't know about the Waco siege, that was this huge standoff between the FBI and Branch Davidians, a really creepy cult led by David Koresh. He would violate dozens of young girls and have children with them, and then make them a part of his growing cult. After the cult grew violent, the FBI held them in a siege for almost 2 months. And the ensuing war led to over 80 deaths. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that fascinated Pekka-Eric Auvinen. He idolized these crazy criminals and would write posts saying what he admired about them. Sheesh. In March 2007, Eric created his own YouTube channel and he named it Natural Select 89. By now, this was his view on life. He was the natural selector. Wait till you hear what he means by this. Eric had already posted 130 videos when his online girlfriend encouraged him to show his face too and make an official introduction to his subscribers.
Hello everyone, this is me, Natural Selector 89, talking to you, friends and haters and everyone else. I got this idea of making an introduction video to my channel, since I already have over 130 videos. And not an introduction video yet, so I guess it's a good time to make one.
You could feel something eerie just from this simple introduction video.
I guess this is all for now, but I'll see you later and out.
But then, Eric started getting the courage to post his face more, so he started filming himself insulting religion and all the people who believed in divinity. Also, did you notice his top? It says, "Humanity is overrated." As his videos got more and more violent, his viewers got increasingly concerned. Some even reported his extreme views online. There was no formal investigation, but his YouTube channel was taken down. This could have been a warning sign to Eric. Perhaps he could have realized he'd taken things too far, but he didn't. He was just angrier, more bitter, and more determined to make an even more extreme channel. So he made a new YouTube channel, this time calling it Sturmgeist89. Storm Spirit 89, that is. His whole life was online if you asked him, but Eric still went to school. And at school, he would still be bullied. Now his schoolmates knew about his channel, and this made him an even stranger character in their eyes. His bullies would call him a freak and make fun of his outcast personality. Unfortunately, this only fueled his isolation more, and here's where it gets really dark. Eric started filming himself talking about the natural selector nickname he'd chosen for himself. This was a play on Darwin's natural selection, the survival of the fittest. Except in Darwin's case, this happens naturally, according to the laws of nature in all species. In Eric's disturbed mind, he was the natural selector, and he wanted to purge the world of those he considered inferior. Remember which regime he sympathized? This is what he wrote in his YouTube channel description.
I am prepared to fight and die for my cause. I, as a natural selector, will eliminate all who I see unfit, disgraces of human race, and failures of natural selection.
That's just horrible. And here's another huge red flag. Eric's view of the world was that the human population could be divided into three categories: the individualistic, the manipulative, and the masses. While the first two made 6% of the population together, the 94% were the masses, who were simply weaker and less self-aware. From his point of view, you could just kill the masses, as they weren't any good for society. Imagine thinking this at 18 years old. He even insulted his own viewers on YouTube for not understanding his godlike view.
You might ask yourselves, why did I do this and what do I want? Well, most of you are too arrogant and closed-minded to understand. The truth is that I am just an animal, a human, an individual, a dissident.
Eric's YouTube became an extreme political manifesto for his terrifying goals.
This is my war. One-man war against humanity, governments, and weak-minded masses of the world. No mercy for the scum of the earth. Humanity is overrated.
Tragically, it wasn't just YouTube that had become his manifesto. In the fall of 2007, Eric literally wrote a long manifesto, both in Finnish and English, and posted it online. It's simply scary to read all that he had to say about the human race and his godlike role on the planet. It's hard to believe these are the words of a once shy 18-year-old. And by the time he wrote his manifesto, Eric had set out to fulfill his terrible natural selector role. Trust me, it's about to get pretty nasty. In August 2007, Eric became a member of the Helsinki Shooting Club. By October, he'd also received a firearm permit. By the beginning of November, Eric had bought over 500 rounds of ammo, but by now his disturbing behavior wasn't a secret. It had been singled out at home, at his school, and even across the ocean in the US.
Those people are the kind of people you want to be keeping your eye on. We're always talking about warning signs, and could we have seen it coming? Well, you know what? If you want to look for warning signs, there they are. Those are your warning signs. Investigate those people.
This is an American YouTuber, The Amazing Atheist. Real name, Kirk. Kirk had the authorities as early as summer 2007 to investigate various YouTube channels with worrying content. These were channels that he thought belonged to people with the actual risk of becoming murderers. He was right. When you preach about killing masses and even revere the Columbine shooting, that's a huge red flag. But instead of the authorities doing anything about it, Kirk's actions only got a big backlash. Who was protesting? A loud online community of people who idolized mass murderers. That's right, there is such a thing. Unfortunately, these people ended up threatening the amazing atheist and told him to stop bullying Eric. On November 6th, 2007, Eric had all he needed to proceed with his awful plan. He'd uploaded his manifesto online, he'd written a letter to his parents, and his online girlfriend had broken up with him for another man. This just provided the right rage and frustration he needed. So the next day, Eric missed his first class at school. Around 9:30 that morning, he posted a video on YouTube showing his high school filmed across a pond. Then the images switched to a red image of him holding a gun and pointing it at the camera. He then wrote, "History will be made today." His plans were clear, but it was too late for anyone to take any action. At around 11:30 p.m., Eric shut down his computer and took his bike to school. There, he entered through a basement door below the school canteen. First, Eric shot a high school student.
She says she first thought they were hearing a toy gun until a couple of them went to have a look. That's when they saw what was happening.
Eric then went into the bathrooms on the ground level. There, he shot 2 more students. That's when the school nurse, Pekka-Eric, shouted at all the students to leave the building. She made a call to the emergency services, but as she was on the phone, she saw a student on the floor lying in a pool of blood. She rushed to their aid, and Eric saw this, so he shot her too. Within 4 minutes, Eric had taken the lives of 6 people. At 11:46, a student rushed into the deputy head teacher's office to tell her what was happening. She passed the message to the head teacher, Helena Kalmi. Helena then made a PA announcement, urging students to stay in their classrooms and not open the door.
She says after that, they hid under and behind tables until the shooting stopped and they could run away.
But the head teacher's announcement only angered Eric. He proceeded to fire randomly into the school corridor, shouting, "I'll kill all of you." Right then, a terrified mother entered the school looking for her son and realizing what was actually happening. Eric looked at her for a few seconds and then spared her life. Then he tried to break into a classroom. He shot 3 times through the door, but only managed to hit a student in the foot. Then he entered a classroom and demanded that all the students join in his revolution. They refused or were simply confused. So Eric shot at the classroom TV and left. Then he rushed to the 2nd floor and shot at more students. He even tried to burn down that floor, but his matches wouldn't light up. Annoyed, he went back down, this time to the canteen, but its doors were locked. Meanwhile, Helena went outside the school to make a phone call. At the same time, Eric came out to the basement door he'd entered. He was angry. He couldn't get into the canteen anymore. When he saw his head teacher, he shot her in the head several times. Around noon, the police and a fleet of ambulances arrived at the Jokela High School. By now, Eric had made it to the 1st floor, and he could see them approaching through the corridor windows. He tried to shoot the officers through the windows, but the bullets didn't go through the glass. So he climbed down to the front entrance and shot from there. He missed, and the officers ordered him to drop the gun. Eric then ran into the lavatories and shot himself in the head. Somehow he survived, and the police found him lying on the bathroom floor next to 327 unused bullets. The officers had him transferred to Helsinki University Hospital, but at 10:15 p.m. that evening, Eric passed away. He had taken the lives of 5 students, a teacher, the nurse, and the head teacher. He had also injured 13 others. By 3 p.m. that day, the police had finally secured the high school and rounded up all the students, but they were just coming to terms with what had happened. Imagine the feeling when everything sinks in and you see the fear, pain, and blood everywhere. Some students lost their best friends that day. Other people lost their wives, mothers, and children. In the aftermath of any horrific event like this, people are usually desperate to find out more about the killer. Who was he? Why did he do this? And what led to his great descent into madness? Well, in Pekka-Eric's case, it was all clear and available to the public, months, even years before the worst happened. Sadly, this really could have been prevented. As the Finnish police looked into Eric's social media accounts, it became all too clear that he had been planning the massacre for quite some time. His YouTube channel description was enough to figure this out. This begged the question, how come no one expressed their concern over Eric's channel? The police soon found that someone had, the amazing atheist, In the aftermath of the mass murder, he posted another video.
Today, I am vindicated, but I don't feel good about it because it was something that I warned you would happen, something that I told you to be mindful of, and you didn't. I warned you. I went specifically head to head with this very kid who committed this act. I made videos directed exactly at him.
Imagine how infuriating it must be to know that you tried to prevent a crime and no one batted an eyelid over it. As soon as Kirk posted his video, others came forward too. Eric had spoken to many people online. One of them was a boy from the US who had also thought that his views were extreme.
When I showed him the screen name, he recognized it as a person he had spoken to from Finland. My client, because they're held virtually incommunicado at the youth center, but he had heard some suggestion that there had been a violent act in Finland. So he was very saddened to hear that there was a connection between someone that he had corresponded with and this act of murder.
What's creepy is that Eric had shared his plans to commit the mass murder to his online friend, and he didn't speak to anyone about it.
I don't believe he's in a position to accept any responsibility. He feels bad, very, very bad about what happened. But he did not encourage Mr. Auvinen. He had absolutely no indication that that individual was going to engage in a criminal act. So he certainly could not have encouraged him. There was nothing conspiratorial between them.
Sure, but it's really disheartening to see how the whole online community feels like they're not in the real world, so they can say whatever they like. The online community is made of real people who live in the real world, and whose actions can have horrible consequences on others. In a sad twist, someone had actually highlighted this issue on the morning of Eric's attack. An online user noticed his most recent posts and threats, so they asked others what to do in that situation.
And just several hours prior, one person asking on an online forum, "I see someone on the net and it totally looks like he's preparing something and is about to do it. Who can I contact to report it? What if this person lives in a foreign country? And what are they able to do?"
These are all pertinent questions. The person who noticed Eric's content was in the US, so dialing 911 might not have helped the situation. Indeed, it's a pretty lengthy process to make sure someone in another country is being investigated by their local police. Sadly, it simply took too long for the concerned user to get any answer. And by the time they had a few answers, Eric had already committed the murders. There was yet another worried soul who hoped to put an end to Eric's horrific plan. One of Eric's friends from school phoned Ismo on the morning of the attack. Ismo was at work, but he picked up the phone anyway. Eric's friend asked Ismo if his son was at home and if his gun was too. Ismo's heart sank. He realized something terrible was about to happen, so he rushed back home. But when he got home, he only got more bad news. Eric's bedroom had been emptied, and the gun was missing from its box. On Eric's desk was a handwritten letter titled, "To my father, mother, and brother." Its contents were truly heartbreaking for any loving parent. Ismo realized that none of the love and support he gave his son amounted to much. He had turned into a vile person with a horrific worldview, and neither of his parents were aware just how terrible his online persona had become. Here's another sad side of the story. While online, Eric was pretty much the worst human being imaginable. In real life, he remained a shy boy. At home, he was soft-spoken and never rebelled against his parents. At school, he was still isolated and quiet. Sure, he made the odd threats every now and then, but none of his schoolmates or teachers saw the violent, confident, preaching killer that Eric was online. The only people who saw the real Eric were those who saw his posts and videos. Tragically, many viewers separate YouTube from reality, not taking the videos seriously, as if they aren't made by a real person. The internet is pretty famous for being a safe space for extreme views. If you express these views on the street, you're likely to get arrested or at least lose your job. Online, there's a barrier, a distance between people. So lots of people get more aggressive in their YouTube comments than they would when addressing a stranger in real life. Sad, but true. Eric did just that. He used the internet as a safe space where he could show his true colors. What started out as a persona, a shield against the bullying, became his true personality. By 2007, his shyness was a persona. As the police looked through Eric's journals, they discovered he had carefully been planning the attack since March 2007. 8 months passed until the actual massacre, and although many people expressed concern, it didn't lead to an actual investigation. However, in the aftermath of it all, Eric's actions asked questions about gun possession in Finland. Finland has a huge percentage of gun ownership in comparison to other European countries, but this is because of an old tradition of hunting.
Because in Finland you use a lot of guns to go hunting, but I don't think that necessarily means that people use guns against each other, just because there are guns.
It's true. Compared to the US, Finland has much lower gun crime rates.
All our relatives, parents, has within the last 50 years or 100 years been dealing with guns in the forest. Almost every Finnish family has a hunting gun at home. We have gone through many wars. We are used to see guns. We all know since small children we have been grown up that there are no toys. Guns are very, very dangerous things. They are used for hunting, not for murdering.
As far as most Finnish people are concerned, guns are not the cause of what Eric did, but guns make it much easier for a psychopathic killer to take a life, because you do it from a distance. You basically feel less responsible for a murder done from far away, and it's physically easier too. Not to say how many more lives you can take with a gun than with a knife or one's bare hands. Eric killed 6 people in 4 minutes. Sheesh. Sadly, another school massacre happened in Finland in 2008. On September 23rd, 22-year-old student Matti Jahani Saari shot and killed 10 people before taking his own life. He was inspired by Eric, just like Eric was inspired by the Columbine massacre. It's very sad to see how terrible events like these propagate, instead of teaching a lesson. Some people are frightened and appalled by these. Others are fascinated. What can we do to make sure horrible attacks like this never happen again? Thanks for watching, you guys. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comment section, and while you're at it, why not give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. See you next time, and stay safe.